There we go. So, guys, welcome to the Saturday morning, or in the U.S., the Friday evening call. Um, Today, Corey was talking about uh, fasting and the effects, etc., like that, the benefits and whatnot. Um, and Corey, I have actually been there and done that. In fact, the longest fast that I was on was 30 days,
Mm,
which is a pretty long fast.
yeah.
And I remember specifically that when I was on that fast, that I went to one of the karate classes that I was taking, and that in fact I couldn't do the exercises. That I was
Mm-hmm.
completely too weak. And later, when I've other dieted and other times, I began to understand how weak I would get when I would, be on a diet or fasting or whatever like that. So the first thing is that the weakness of the body, and that uh, to go to it from the perspective of the Buddha, that he recommended, in fact, there are sutras about it as well as the practice of the monks, to eat one meal a day. And that what fasting does is that it takes a good thing to an extreme. That what we want to live is a balanced middle path life. And so one extreme would be eating all the time or eating three, maybe four meals a day. And the other extreme would be fasting. But the Buddha would recommend just one meal a day, that it's healthy. And so that's what the monks practice. One of the side benefits of practicing by eating one meal a day is that we are able to control the hunger. Now, this is not something that happens on the first day, but basically, we begin to not pay much attention to the hunger because we know when the feel is going to happen, and that we get psychologically prepared for that, so that hunger is never an issue. That in fact, this is one of the big differences between the Mahayana and the Theravada. And the old joke is from the Zen guy is that he eats when he wants and he sleeps when he wants, thinking that the Theravada don't have that because they're the ones that have all the rules. And that in fact, the Theravada can say that because we eat once a day, that we do eat when we want, and that we don't ever get hungry. That we don't eat when we get hungry, we eat when it's the right time to eat, and that hunger becomes less of an issue. Um, so, if we are taking this middle path, then you're going to be, let us say, doing the body a favor. That in fact, if you eat one meal a day, then you have a kind of fasting already going on, but you're not doing the kind of damage that we do when we're on a fast, like having low energy, etc., like that. Uh, but also the issue of the feelings, especially the feelings of weakness and the feelings of hunger. Actually, there's a benefit from fasting if you can fast correctly, in the sense that when you're fasting, you can look at food and say, "Oh, I don't want any of that stuff. I'm happy without it." Or when you begin to get weak, you can say, "Oh, this weakness is very good for me because it's pulling the calories out of the fat storage in the body." That uh, the attitude that, in fact, almost everyone who goes on a fast or gets hungry, they get irritable. When an animal gets hungry, they'll actually get violent. They will try to eat things that they shouldn't be eating. Okay, so hunger is a feeling that drives us. It's actually very connected to the self-preservation instinct, and that it would be quite useful for everyone to be able to manage that feeling of hunger, and that this is where the eating one meal a day really is beneficial, quite beneficial in the sense of not getting hungry, that we learn to control it. Now, uh, that takes time, and that in the time of the Buddha, uh, there's actually a sutta about it. I don't remember where it is, but basically the situation was is that the Buddha requested that the monks no longer go out in the evening, that there was already a prohibition to go out in the afternoon. And the reason for that was is that um, in the tropics, it gets really hot starting in the afternoon. Afternoon, it gets really hot. And so the lay people are out taking a nap. And at about 4 in the afternoon, things start getting busy again. Like the shop owners will close in the afternoon and then open at 4 in the afternoon. And so the Buddha didn't want the monks out there either during the sleep time or during the business time. But then he made a rule not to go out in the evening and gave a whole long list of reasons why not to go out in the evening. I think, in fact, the list has 10 items on it. Let's see if I can remember some of them. One was is that you will fall into a cesspool. You're not watching where you're going at night. Number 2, you can fall into a thicket. Number 3, you can fall in among thieves. The thieves are out at night. Number 4, you can fall into the red light district, that they're out active at night. And number 5, especially in India, this has been a long held tradition that Indians had their big meal in the evening. And so if the monks come for Bendabat, they're going to interrupt the evening of the people. And also, it's not time for the leftovers. And so the Buddha recommended that they not go out at night also, to stay out of the thickets, to stay out of the red light districts, to stay away from the thieves, and that they can remain comfortable and happy. So if they can't go out in the afternoon, they can't go out in the evening, and they can't go out in the nighttime, that leaves the morning. That in fact there is a precept for the 8 and 10 preceptors. It's called Wakala Bojana Vairamani Sikhabadam Samatiyami, and that this is often misunderstood, especially in Western Buddhism, that you're supposed to eat at the right time. But when you look into the Vinaya, you can see, in fact, that, oh no, that's not the point. The point is not when you eat, the point is when you gather the food, because the food is being gathered through the alms, and so you do that with politeness and with making no trouble for the people who donate. That in fact the tradition has always been that the people who were eating at night with a great big feast will leave the leftovers and give those to the next morning to the monks. I have actually gotten half-eaten bananas and half-eaten fish in my bowl. That only happened around Wat Suan Mok. When I was in Bangkok and other places where there was more wealthy, they didn't do that. But very, very poor neighborhoods, they'll give you whatever they've got around. And so back to that point about when do we go out? There was a sutta about a group of monks went to the equivalent of the state fair. And at the state fair, You've got all of these, rides, entertainments, all kinds of foods and things like that. And so the monks went to the state fair and got a whole bunch of groceries, so much so that they brought it back to share with the other monks. And the monks who were there criticized and chastised those monks because you were at a place, you were at the state fair where people are not expecting to have to deal with the monks. That's the wrong place to go and the wrong place to be at the wrong time. You might get a lot of groceries, but the people are not going to be so pleased to have to interrupt their state fairing in order to feed the monks. So, with that particular point, when the Buddha made the restriction about the time to go out, one monk was very unhappy and very upset about this. As you can imagine, that happens when people hear these stories. They say, "Wait a minute, I don't want to do that." And so he actually avoided the Buddha to the point that his friends and teammates said, "Hey, you need to go talk to him about this." And so he and the Buddha had this conversation, and what the Buddha came to was, again, that it's not when the monk eats, but it's when he gets the food. And so the Buddha made an allowance so that the monks, after they eat their communal breakfast together, any of the leftovers from that, the monk can take in his bowl and eat as he pleases throughout the day, if that's what he needs to do in order to manage his hunger. And so he takes the leftovers, and if you have only leftovers, they're not really all of that they're not all of that delicious, not all of that appealing. And so uh, what happens is that if the monk doesn't eat the leftovers, then there's a new rule that comes in that's actually quite beneficial, and that is that the monks do not keep food overnight. Why is that? Because all kinds of animals come out at night, and they will come into the kuti and eat the food that's there. It's better to put the food that you have left over out in the yard or out in the forest so that the animals can eat it rather than come into your kuti and eat the food and then eat you too. And and so not having the food kept at night, but being able to eat in the afternoon was what the Buddha allowed, and that I saw at Wat Suan Mok that a lot of the monks would wash their bowls in the washing place after the meal, but quite a lot of them did not wash their bowls. The reason they didn't wash their bowls is because they were not empty, and they would take the food back into their kuti, back into the forest or wherever they were living, uh, and do this practice of giving the food to the animals in the evening if they didn't want any. Now, when I was a monk in the United States, I came to understand every Wat, mostly because they were houses that they started renting. They just rented a house, and so every house has got a kitchen. So every Wat that I stayed in the U.S. had a kitchen. It had a refrigerator, and that the monks then would not keep any food in their room. They would keep it in the refrigerator, and that sometimes in the night the monks would go raid the refrigerator. And this is known. I mean, this is kind of common. Not only that, but the lay people support it by stocking the refrigerator. So it's kind of crazy that we have this idea of Wakala Bhojana has to do with what time you eat rather than the issue of when do you gather the food. But ultimately, the idea is to eat just once a day when you get the food, and that it's a communal meal, all the monks eat together, and then the younger monks will carry the stuff off, and the more senior monks will wash their bowls because they're finished for the day. So, uh, when we come back to the issue of fasting, that it may have some benefits on its own, but the two issues of weakness and hunger now become primary. In fact, you could say that when someone is on the fast, they've only got two issues in their life. The bank is not an issue. The cops are not an issue. Being in prison is not an issue. Going through a divorce is not an issue. What's the issue? I'm tired and I'm hungry. And these go back to the very primal things. These are, instinctual. Now, if you have a really, really strong mind, then that fasting time is an opportunity to deal with being tired. It's okay to be tired. I can handle being tired. Yeah, I can't even get out of bed. I'm so tired. I can handle that. And then later you feel, oh, wow, it's so great. I can actually get out of bed. I feel good enough to get up. All right. But that generally doesn't happen while you're still on a fast. That will happen the day after you've had a meal or so. All right. So we can either work for having the vim, vigor, and vitality that comes with being vibrantly alive, or we can actually put weights on us, like the fasting, in order to test ourselves. Just like runners and tennis players, the runners will put ankle bracelets on, and the tennis players will put bracelets on their wrist that are great big heavy bags of sand or lead or something like that. And what these tennis players are doing is that they're building up their strength and trying to also, with that strength and those weights that are on their arm, get the speed back up to where it was before they put the weights on. Now, just because Wimbledon champion tennis players do that to build up their speed and their strength does not mean that a brand new beginner who is learning how to play tennis should put those heavy weights on their wrist. That we want to work within the boundaries or the limits that we have. And so, in that regard, for if you've never fasted before, then don't go for a long fast. Go for 1 day's fast. Like you eat today, and then you fast the whole rest of the day, and then tomorrow you will have another meal, and then you'll have another 24-hour fast. Then later, you can have a meal, and then skip that day, and then skip the next, and skip a day, and then have a meal. So you have one meal every 2 days. But in fact, the Buddha practiced that way by eating less and less. He never went on a fast himself, but he did restrict and limit the amount of food that he consumed. You've probably seen the images and the statues of what they would call the fasting Buddha. Have you ever seen any of those?
Yeah, they call him the emaciated Buddha.
Okay, guess what? He was not the Buddha when he did that. That happened before he was a Buddha. That was when he was practicing the austerities. And after he figured out what really was going on, he did not recommend to do that anymore. He recommended that people do eat once a day, and get into the habit of that.
Yeah, so, he said it's not conducive to happiness. I don't know if he used the word happiness, but it's not conducive to jhana.
Right, exactly. That when people are fasting, they've got that tiredness, and that's going to prevent them from jhana. And when they're hungry, they don't like it. But in fact, that's a very interesting point about liking hunger. Very, very few people ever learn to like hunger. It has an advantage. And that is that if you're hungry, that actually means then that the body is pulling the fat out of its storage, rather than using the food. And when you can say, wow, I'm hungry, that means I'm actually losing weight. But very few do that. They can't say, wow, I'm really glad I'm hungry right now. That's going to be a great benefit to me. They say instead, oh no, I'm hungry. I wish I had something to eat, but I'm fasting right now. And so they are in conflict with each other. This is not a unified mind. The unified mind would be being able to be hungry and like being hungry, rather than being hungry and not liking it. The same thing is true about being tired and like being tired, as opposed to being tired and not liking it. So this, for almost everyone, there's going to be no jhana available when one is fasting or when one is not getting enough food to eat. That in fact, you probably would be better to practice the jhana so that you can get yourself into a really, really good state and then happily start fasting, but not in the way of just stopping eating. Like that 30-day fast that I was on, that was a major mistake in my life.
What happened afterwards? So I know that when you fast, there's a big rebound effect. Did you get like extreme jhana or vigor and like an energy boost? I mean, what happened when you returned to eating in the 1 or 2 months after that 1 month fast?
As I remember it, I was still on a diet, and this was the time after, let us say, the fast was broken when I went to stay with Goenka. That I started eating when I went to the retreat center in Igatpuri and started eating, but there they have very meager breakfast, an adequate lunch, and nothing much after that. And so I went back from the regimen of no eating at all into a better regimen rather than just packing it in. Almost everyone who goes on a diet or goes on a fast, when they come off the diet or come off the fast, they really start packing it back in.
Oh, yeah. I went straight to pizza. The first fast I ever did was 2 weeks. I didn't really have any concept of kind of taking it slow. Someone gave me some good advice on how to do 1 week fast, and I decided to go for 2 weeks. And I had a kind of a rebound effect too, both in what I ate, because I went right back to eating pizza. That was what I craved the most the whole time. And then like kind of, but yeah, I remember this really great feeling of feeling like such health and like a much stronger energy and just happy, so happy to just be eating, but also because I was eating a lot of pizza and I just craved pizza so much. I had a really strong bliss feeling for a week or two. And then it was like 2 weeks of fasting, 2 weeks of extreme bliss, and then kind of went back to feeling normal again. But maybe it was a little bit longer. Maybe it was 2 or 4 weeks after that. It lasted a good bit, though.
Well, maybe the thought would be there, that in fact it would be a very common thought, is that, oh, I am so glad that I'm not fasting right now. I am so happy that I'm finished with that fast. This is basically what we look at in the hindrances, that there is one of them. There's actually in Sutra number 39, there are 5 examples of being free from the hindrances. And one of the examples is getting out of the hospital. That when you go into the hospital, you want to go into the hospital. You're sick and you want help. But there comes a time in that hospital, it may not even not be when you're well yet, but you want out of that hospital. The hospital becomes a prison and you want out of there. You feel good enough to get out. And that I remember most specifically one of the times that it happened was that I talked to the doctor and he says, okay, we'll let you out. Let me go get the paperwork done. And I waited for the next 4, 5, or 6 hours while the staff did whatever they were doing to not get my paperwork done so that I could get out of the hospital. But boy, when I finally got that paperwork, I was so happy to get out of the hospital. Okay. So that getting out of it, getting out of the fast, getting out of the hospital. In more recent times, I've had some problems with my hip and my knee, and that the problem with the hip is sitting in this chair. The longer I sit in this chair, the more it hurts, and so I have to balance my time from sitting up. But the knee is getting better. For about 2 weeks, I had to use a walker because I was unsteady and I wanted to make sure it was the walker. But then after a while, I began to walk, get up, start to walk, and then pick up the walker off the floor and walk without it, just holding it and carrying it around. Now I trust myself that I can walk without the walker. And that is so joyful to be finished with that problem with the knee. Okay? So when something stops hurting, we feel good about it stop hurting. That's a major point, that when things stop hurting, we really, really like that it stops hurting. That's, in fact, part of what First Jhana really is all about. When we stop hurting ourselves with our thoughts, when we become healthy to get out of our own hospital, when we get well enough and rehabilitated enough to get out of our own prison, when we paid off of our debt. Wow, that's a big one. Have you ever been in debt and then paid off your debt? Nobody wants to be in debt, and yet look, in America, the whole country is basically in debt. Can you imagine what it feels like to be out of debt? Try it sometime. Don't owe anybody for your car. Don't owe anybody for your house. Don't owe anybody anything. You don't have any payments to make. You've got no power bills. You've got no water to pay. You've got no recurring bills, no mortgage, no loans, no debts. Wow, what a relief that is. That's almost not possible to happen outside the monkhood, but there are those who practice it. A lot of people, in fact, within the practice of Buddhism, that's one of the primary goals, is to get out of debt. And so another aspect of that sutta that I was mentioning is that how about being on a long trip or a long journey, carrying your baggage, having your passport stamped, and you're in a foreign place, and then finally you arrive back home again with all your luggage, your passport, and everything is intact. Wow, what a relief that is. So it's naturally going to happen, Corey, that when you come off a fast, what a relief. What a relief it is to come off of a fast. Why? Because normally the people who are fasting, they don't like being hungry. They don't like being weak.
Yeah.
So if you can manage that hunger so that you begin to like it, that would be one of the greatest benefits that you can get from being on a fast, whether it's a 24-hour fast or a 48-hour fast or a week's fast or whatever kind of fasting that you have, that we can feel good about the qualities of the fasting itself, rather than doing it because you really, really want some benefit out of it. Get the benefit of the fasting while you're fasting. Almost everybody that I know of in the West, they don't fast for spiritual reasons. They fast because they want to lose weight. So I want to do this in order to get that. And they wind up having all of those bad side effects. Like, here's an example. I want a girl, so I'm going to go buy a car. I want a girl, so I'm going to go buy a car, a chick magnet. Right? Guess what? Getting the car does not necessarily get the chick. Not only that, but now that you've got the car, you've got car payments, and you don't like it when your chick magnet gets a scratch. You don't like it when the magnet is no longer magnetic. And that happens to the cars, okay? So getting a car in order to get a girl is a pretty stupid thing to do, but guess what? Almost all advertisements about cars have that quality. There's only two reasons for selling a car. One is that it's a chick magnet, and other is that it's exciting. This car goes fast. Wow, this is a fast car. Go buy this one. Okay? So we want the car for all of the wrong reasons, and so we suffer with the mortgage and the scratches and all of this kind of stuff because we didn't get what we wanted out of the car anyway. We either bought it because it was a chick magnet, no chick, or we bought it because it's a high-speed race car. Guess what? We don't race anymore. And so we never got what we wanted, but we bought the car instead. Okay, so let's look at that same thing then about the issue of fasting. If you're fasting for the right reasons, it will be of great benefit to you. If you're fasting for the wrong reasons, then you're going to wind up in those twin things of feeling weak and feeling hungry. And most people don't like feeling weak. They don't like feeling hungry. So if you're on a fast, the question is, can you use that then as a spiritual point so that while you're fasting, you do fast and get that high because you feel, wow, I can handle this fast. I can do it. So if you're going to do the fast, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Wow, I can handle this weakness. Wow, I can handle my hunger. Wow, this is a really good thing. And then it's a spiritual journey. Just like the two different kinds of tennis players. The beginner does not need those bracelets of iron or lead. It's only the very, very advanced tennis players that are actually already have the speed and already have the power, but then they put those lead weights on their wrist so that they can increase their power and increase the speed. How do you increase the speed? Well, you try to get it as best you can to time what it is without those ankle or wrist bracelets, and then time it with them so that you're trying to bring your speed up to the same speed that it was before you put the bracelets on, so that after you take them off, now you're even faster. So this is what you can think of with the fasting is that if you're practicing well, that means that you're already an advanced spiritual person who is getting great benefit out of the fasting because you're skilled at it, as opposed to the beginner is going to feel tired and he doesn't like it. He's going to feel hungry and he doesn't like it.
Well, honestly, I wasn't doing as much work as I could. Like, I know I mentioned earlier that I was getting a lot of hunger and irritability and it was providing a lot of work, but I wasn't using it as much as I could. And honestly, I'll try to do more jhana, like use the jhana with, as the speed breaker, kind of the bar to get, to set the pace to. But yeah, like, I don't know, I just haven't been using it exactly, but I'll try to definitely do it in a more constructive way, a more scientific way.
Errol, you got your hand up.
Hey, Dhammarato. I got like a few quick questions. I'm hoping maybe you can make a story out of it. This is before you became a monk and then after you left.
Yeah, that 30-day fast was before I became a monk.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different on the fasting. It's more about your personal life a little bit. You weren't married before and you didn't have kids. And the few questions there's so did you not want to have kids? Did you want to not get married? And then after you met Tam, like how old were you? And then made you decide to get married, and then you had Kitty, and then how is having Kitty?
No, you got all of that backwards.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Kitty.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
Yes.
here's the story about that. That I disrobed in 2008 for a combination of reasons. The most important one was that my mother had just had a big automobile accident and that she was no longer mentally capable of managing her business. And I had already, as a monk, been helping doing a whole lot of the management of the business, but not taking care of any of the money. But she got to the point that she couldn't do the payroll for the 2 or 3 people that she had working for her. And so I disrobed because I could handle that as well. There was also some issues on the other side in the sense that the wat that I was staying with got into a squabble over who owns the property. And that without going into the detail, it was just easier at that particular point in time to disrobe. And so that was in 2008. I then got the business back on track. And then in 2010, I left to go back to Thailand. Basically, the deal that I had with my mom was that so long as I can remain a monk, I'll stay in the United States. But when I disrobed, I didn't like the lay life in the United States. Living in America as a monk was easy enough. That's like living anywhere as a monk. But when you walk out the door of the wat, guess what? You've got society right there.
How old were you at this point?
How old was I? 62, 3, 4, something like that. And so in 2010, I left to go live in Thailand, and I was visiting Udon Thani because of a very famous monk had gotten old, and I wanted to meet him. In fact, in 2012, he died. What was this monk's name? Ajahn Mahaboa, I think was the name, right? Not Mon, but Boa. And there's more than one Ajahn Mahaboas in Thailand. And so this one was very famous in Udon Thani. He was, let us say, it was widespread knowledge among the Thai people that this monk was an arahat. He's actually got a YouTube video where he was talking about, do arahats cry? He did it in Thai language, but it's on, I think it's got English overtitles or something like that. So while I was there in Udon Thani, that's where I met Tam. I met Tam through another person because Tam had a little bit of English, and this Thai person wanted help with her English, and so Tam was able to help her. But when Tam saw what kind of person I was, very desirable for several reasons. One is that marrying a Farang is highly respected in Thailand. Number 2, marrying an ex-monk is highly respected in Thailand. Number 3, marrying someone who knows the Dhamma is even more highly respected. And when she saw me, she was not about to let me go. I was not all that interested in her at the time. That in fact, the story is that I told her that I was Muslim, and she packed up. I mean, and not only that I was Muslim, but that I wanted 4 wives. If she wanted to be a wife, okay, but I want 3 others too. And she grabbed her stuff and got into her truck, this truck right here, by the way, and took off immediately. Got rid of her. Wow. And she came back the next day and she never left. Okay. So that was 2010 and 11 and whatnot. And when I came back to the United States in 2012 to take care of some of the stuff with Mom's business, and then went back. Now, when I went back, the timing that I went back was because Ajahn Po had arranged for me to do a retreat in northeast Thailand, close to Chiang Mai. And so Tam at that time says that she wants a visa to the United States. So I'm going to help her get the visa. You know, in Udon Thani, there's no consulate or anything, but we went to the Chiang Mai. So that was her excuse to go with me on that trip. And we wound up in the same room together. And that was the beginning of Kitty.
Were you guys married at this point or not yet?
Pardon?
Were you guys married or not yet?
Married? Made?
Married.
Married. No. That in fact, that's the later story. We weren't married until 2019.
Gotcha.
And that's what she wanted, so that's what we did. But eventually, actually, when Kitty was less than a year old, here's the story, that Achan Mahaboa had just died. The whole city was in turmoil. The whole city was jam-packed with traffic, mostly because people from all over the place were coming in for the big funeral and everything like that. And so Udon Thani was in kind of bad shape. Meanwhile, and I'll be honest with you, what happened with that was that Tam had fallen into playing cards, gambling, and wound up owing a whole lot of money. And so she was thinking about leaving and going to this city or that city or whatnot like that. And I says, well, for me, it's time to leave Pattaya anyway. I mean, Udon Thani. And so we went to Pattaya, but we didn't stay there for very long. I found out that Pattaya is worse than Udon Thani, even when there's a funeral. And so then I remembered, in fact, I'd already had it in the back of my mind, I have always been in love with this island, Koh Phangan. And so in 2013, we moved then to Udon Thani, from Udon Thani down here to Koh Phangan. And basically, we spent 1 year in one place, which was next door to this house. And we've been in this house since 2014. Almost 10 years in this house. I love it. This is such a wonderful, marvelous place to live. It's just a one-bedroom house, but it's big enough, adequate for everything. And so another point is that a lot of the people in Tam's family are in Koh Phangan. They came down here because this is a really good place to get a job because of the tourism. And Tam was really easy to pick up a job because her cousin was already working at the same place. Now we have a lot of people who are part of the family. Pom works there, my son-in-law, or my stepson rather, and Ja, my stepdaughter, they work there. Jane has worked there. She's got cousins. I think 5 or 6 of the people who work at this same restaurant complex. And right now, Tam is the kitchen manager.
So did Tam have 2 kids already?
Yes, she already had kids. They were both well, actually, when I call Pum, he is actually Tam's nephew, but he had lived with Tam. So the question is, does she have two girls, or does she have 2 girls and a son? The answer is, that's a Western kind of question. In Thailand, of course, he's her son, because he's he was born to Tam's sister. And Jane actually has gone to live in Australia. And everybody now in the family wants to move to Australia. Kitty wants to go to Australia, and everything. So anyway, we've got, one of the things about that that's important is that I had been in Thailand long enough and around Asians long enough to know that this is a matriarchal society. And so what I intended to do and became successful at is promoting Tam to be the matriarch of her family. So everybody in her family depends upon her, and she's the boss. And I very much like that because they take care of me really, really well. And that actually then the next point is the real answer is that I have known all along for many years now. After the age of 60, people begin to understand that old age is coming. You guys are young enough, you see old age far away. When you see old age staring you right in the face, you have a different attitude about it. And that's the point is that I became part of this Thai family because I knew that would be the best way that I could have a very happy, easy life in my old age, being very well taken care of. And that's proven to be true. That Ja cooks for me when Tam's at work, that Hitty serves me, and I'm the old patriarch. And it gives me, it's an easy, happy life. So, that in fact, if I were still a monk, it would be about the same, except that then I would be relying upon the other monks to take care of me. But here I've got a Thai family that's happily taking care of me.
And part of my question is, as I'm getting a little older, like having kids and all that, did you know that gives me a little bit of dukkha. Did you know when you were younger that you didn't want to have kids? And you didn't want to get married? Did that ever cause you dukkha?
I have been in and out of relationships, mostly before I became a monk. Okay. And that in fact, here's a story. Gosh, this is the old stuff. This happened in the 1970s, let us say from 76 to 79, that I had already started teaching computer science at Detroit Institute of Technology. That school has been closed now for years. But I had two girlfriends. Actually, what happened was that I had not just two girlfriends, but an occasional third. Gail and Jean. And Gail and Jean knew each other. In fact, both of them were students at the same university in psychology. That Gail already had her master's degree in psychiatry.
That's frowned upon these days, by the way, Dhammarato.
Pardon?
That's frowned upon these days, the teacher and the student.
Well, here's the point, is that I made a major mistake that caused both of these women a great deal of suffering, because I was much more interested in the spiritual life than I was with having girlfriends in my life. And so I took off and came to India. In fact, Jean followed me to India. And she stayed with Rajneesh for a while and then came back to California. But that's the situation is that I was kind of much more interested in the spiritual life than I was in women.
But you didn't have the feeling as you were in your 30s that you to have kids and get married at all?
No. No, I was
Corey,
much
do you ever
more.
Get that?
Pardon?
I was thinking if Corey knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. The desire was there, but it was easy enough to manage.
So you didn't feel like you were going to miss out on having kids or a family?
Yeah, that's like missing out on being roasted in a fire. Yeah, the meat that's on that fire is pretty delicious. We want to get in there and get some of it, but we wind up getting burned. And I could see that. I could see the dukkha. I could see that I caused people trouble. I could see that I was, in fact, suffering myself over wanting things that I never could have. Gail was never able to provide me with what I wanted. That, in fact, that's part of our culture. The culture is that you get a girl and she will solve all of your problems, or at least the biggest number one problem. Guess what? No, she doesn't. She brings her baggage with her. How can you make her be what you want her to be when she can't even make herself be what she wants to be?
Right. But even for women, though, right? Like once they get in their 40s, it's much more challenging for them to have kids. Right.
Yes, but they've got this biological instinct, this biological urge to do that. My biological urge was diverted out of having babies and having sexual relationships and having friends. I found my friendship in the Sangha. I found my friendship other places, and that the sexuality is just kind of a side point. That, in fact, Achan Po and I had a long talk about this, more than one point, but this long talk, what he was talking about is that he had been in robes since early childhood, about the age of 6. Even though he was not an orphan, his family was quite wealthy. His family owns most of Koh Samui, all the mountains and everything. And so, since he had been a monk since the age of 6, not fully ordained yet, he didn't ordain fully until he was 20 years old. But being in the robes keeps him away from television, keeps him away from fashion, keeps him away from women who are, let us say, crossing their legs in a certain way that gives guys delight. He was not ever having to put up with any of that kind of stuff. And so he was not, let us say, bombarded with the visuals and sensual objects that most of the men in the Western society are, let us say, exploited by. That you're highly, highly exploited by the sexuality that's part of our culture, and part of that has to do with sex is the absolute best thing that you could ever possibly have, and sex is bad, sex is wrong, sex is dangerous. You're going to go to hell if you have sex. Now look at that kind of dichotomy. It's got two extremes. Way over on one side, sex is the best thing that you ever had, and also sex is really dangerous. The girl can get thrown out of school. She can die from having babies. That the young man doesn't have as big a problem. But if he gets married, now he's got kids. He's got to support. He's got family that he has to support, etc., like that. And so there's a huge amount of dangers with it, both social and also medical. And so in the society that we're living in, Achan Po was quite lucky because he was never in the issue with either one of those extremes, and he could stay in the middle place of, yeah, many people have sex, but so what? It's not a big deal. And that your question indicates that you've been raised in Western society as if sex was a great big no-no and a great big pleasure, the best thing that you could have happen. And those things are not true. That's just cultural. And when you recognize that you don't need women and they don't need you, that you can live your life very comfortably and very happily. But you see, in my old age, because I've got Social Security from the old days when I was working, that we actually have more income. My income is greater than the amount of money that we spend. Now, if I went back to the United States, I would really be poor. But here in Thailand, I can live like a king.
It's more of the dukkha of, as I'm getting older, it's pretty deep. Like I should have a family, right? Or I should have kids as I'm getting older, right? Because
wait a minute. That's interesting. That's just a thought. I'm getting older. I should have kids. Rather, I'm getting older. Wow, that means I'm over the hump and I don't have to have kids. Which thought do you want to have? The I should have kids is the cultural part. There's no reason why you should have kids other than your mother and your grandmother and the women in your family want you to have kids, but they're being selfish. In other words, they're going to make your life really, really miserable so that they can say hi to their grandkids once a week. That's kind of an imbalance. I wouldn't recommend that you go with what other people want you to do and start looking at your own mind about what's best for you. And ultimately, for everyone, being alone is better. People are beginning to figure that out. That in fact, in the old days, let us say in the 1800s and before that, being a bachelor or being a spinster was much, much, much more common. Nowadays, the pressure is on us. We got to have sex. We got to have sex. We got to have sex. And that's part of the culture. But if you look at it from the perspective of, well, why are there so many divorces? Isn't the divorce rate itself a proof that sex is not all of that great? It's cracked up to be much, much better than it actually is. And so we have that desire for sex. It's actually instinctual that all the genes are there, but it depends upon whether you're going to keep pounding those genes over and over and over again to bring that up, or whether you're just going to kind of ignore it because it's not that important. You don't have to undress every girl you see.
Yeah, it's not so much as sex. It's more than the procreation. Because I already have a girlfriend, and that's not the issue. It's.
Would you rather say that she's got a boyfriend? You don't need a girlfriend, but she's got a boyfriend.
She better like listening to this conversation, but yes.
Well, here's the side point of it. And go back. Okay, just let me get this one point in.
Okay,
yeah. Out in the often people will say, "Is this your dog, or are these your dogs?" The answer is no. I'm that dog's human. The dog owns me. I don't own the dog. The dog is the one who's jealous. It's very funny about Lucky that when somebody comes, like Kat will come and we'll look at my computer together, we got to force Lucky out between us because she's going to be right in there. She owns me. I don't own Lucky. Okay, so think about the girlfriend that way, that she owns you. You don't own her. You're free from that. Go ahead now. That. All right.
It's a tough feeling to push, or the need to procreate.
It's not a need, it's a desire. It's a want.
Yeah. I mean, how do you like get over that?
Stop thinking about it. Start looking at all of those sexual I want kind of thoughts, whether it's I want a car, I want to win a chess game, I want a girl, I want her panties, I want what I want. And start recognizing those ignorant wantings. And start coming into I don't want. Yeah, I want that, but it's dangerous. Yeah, I want that big Harley hog, but it's dangerous. That reminds me of the story that's quite famous now between Achan Cha and Achan Samedo. They were at a ceremony. The Keten ceremony is where, I won't go into it other than the women, the girls, the ones who were marriage age, the ones who were looking for young men, get all dressed up to go to the watch, just like the girls get all dressed up on Sunday morning to go to church, right? Okay. So, Sunday going to meeting. So there was this Keten ceremony, and Achan Cha and Achan Samedo was there together, and Achan Cha came up to Achan Samedo and says, well, what do you think? Now, I'm sure that Achan Cha had been looking at Achan Samedo, looking at what was available. And Achan Samedo, with the presence of mind, knowing the teachings of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa about Paticca Samuppada, his answer was, I like it, but I don't want it. And this is the way that you can start having the attitude about women. Yes, they are beautiful. They work hard to be beautiful and attractive. Give them the credit for being beautiful in your eyes and in others' eyes. I like it. Beautiful. But I don't want it. I got better things to do with my time.
So how do you know you should not pursue that then?
Because you can see the dukkha. That's the whole teaching of the Buddha. If you can see the dukkha in it, you can avoid it. But if you can only see the enticement, if you can only see the pleasure without seeing the responsibilities and the dukkha and the dissatisfaction and all of that kind of stuff. So that's the whole teaching of the Buddha right there, is dukkha. See the dukkha. If you can see the dukkha in relationships, if you can see the dukkha in the sexuality, if you can see that you don't need to do that you could leave them beautiful without trying to take their clothes off or get them in bed with you. You could just let them be beautiful. Yeah, she's gorgeous. So what? I like her, but I don't want her. I like it, but I don't want it. And so when a thought about a girl comes up, or a thought about particular pieces of clothing, or the particular pieces of clothing missing, etc., like that, you can say, wow, yeah, that's really nice, but it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. Look how much trouble is caused by sexuality, especially about guys running around on their wives because they like, and then they get married, and then they still like. And they like this one and they like that one, and soon they're having trouble. One of the major reasons why people want a lot of money is so that they can have power that comes with money. The reason they want power is to have power over other people. I mean, look at the big stars like Donald Trump. Everything he's doing is about getting laid, being powerful, being on top of people. And he causes himself and other people so much dukkha, so much trouble. And when the dukkha comes, guess what he does? He doesn't see it in the sense of what he's doing. He sees it in the sense of somebody else is doing me harm. They're out to get me. I'm beautiful. I'm okay. If he would look at the dukkha that he's creating for himself, he wouldn't blame others for it. He would stop doing what he's doing. Can you see what you're doing and stop doing it? Now, when do we do that? Well, this is back to the point of practicing anapanasati. Here you go, sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair, comfortably having happy thoughts, and then either out the window or out the mind's door or whatever like that, some image comes up about a girl. And you can say, aha, I see that image, or I see that thought that I'm having. And it's okay to have that thought, but I can think of something better. Let me not think about that. Let me go think about something that's more healthy, valuable, and wholesome. And so this is part of the practice of anapanasati, is to see the thoughts that we have that will lead us to danger, see the thoughts that we have that will lead us into dukkha, and start changing those thoughts. And one of the thoughts would be, wow, I'm going to be a whole lot better without her. If I get in bed with her, she'll own me. There is always a price to pay for everything. And when we recognize that most often the price is higher than the benefit, we do begin to do a cost-benefit analysis with the thoughts that we have. Is this thought going to cost me in bad feelings more than the pleasure that it gets me? For instance, if I'm thinking about that girl, wow, she's very nice. Oh, I'd really like to have her. And then the thought comes, but I don't have her. And now I feel bad because I don't have something. And it was just a thought all along. There was nothing to it other than your thought. And so thoughts about women are going to lead to building up those thoughts into desire. I like her, I want her. I like her, I really want her. I like her, I gotta have her. I like her, I'm going to get up and go talk to her. And then wait a minute, if I talk to her, she'll reject me. And there comes the dukkha immediately. You haven't even talked to her yet, and you're already in bad feelings. If we can see that, and by the way, this issue that we're on now about sexuality is exactly the same issue as the fasting. It's what do we want out of it, and what is the cost that's going to get us what we want. Especially if we're doing it in the side, like, I want her so bad, I'm going to go buy a Mercedes. If I go buy that Mercedes, then for sure I'll get that girl. Guess what? Mercedes is no guarantee that you're going to get a girl. But it is a guarantee you're going to be in debt. It is a guarantee that you're going to have to keep that car in service. And in fact, if you buy that car to get a girl, you wind up, that car owns you. Oh, please, my tire is flat. Please put it up. Oh, my gas tank is empty. Oh, please fill me up. And the car owns you rather than you own the car. This happens also in relationships. That's why I was saying, let her have you as a boyfriend, but don't see her as your girlfriend. Don't try to own her even in your mind. Just let her be a friend. And take the desire out of it, because the desire is dangerous. Now, once we get to the point of having children, that takes on a different thing, because we're now brought someone into the world, and if we don't do our duty, that child's going to suffer. This is why I would not recommend a Westerner who has children, young children, to quit their life and come ordained as a monk, because they can't do that. The family won't like it. The pressure will be there. The children will resent the dad for having gone away, etc., like that. So the time to ordain is before you have kids or after they're grown up.
So would you recommend not having kids then?
I would highly, highly recommend for those who are practicing the Dhamma to stop having even thoughts about having kids. Listen, we've got 7 billion people on this planet. How many more do we need?
That's fair.
Don't we have enough already? And not only that, but if we have a child, are we going to guarantee that this child is going to have a happy life? Because almost all the children that are born wind up being miserable. So you're not doing this new child that you're bringing into the world any favors at all.
Unless you live in jhana, you got to live a good example. Maybe you do some good for them, you know?
Yes, that's the case. If you've got kids, do the best you can to make them have a happy life. But that's no reason then to go have kids and go take on that responsibility to have a happy life.
Yeah. Interesting. So your mind hasn't changed after having your daughter.
Well, I see her as a responsibility. In this case, I have to wait until she's 18 or 21 or something before I can check out. I mean, I'm ready to go. I'm already 78. I'm already over the hill. In fact, for most, the lifespan in Thailand is in its 60s. The lifespan in many of the states in the United States is 71, 72. That in fact, the only place there's females in, I think it's Hong Kong, that their expected lifespan is 81. So even at the top place in the world, I'm pushing it.
No, I talk to people who are 80. You're gonna start pushing it when you're about 90 to 95. You're gonna be. You got some more in you. Yeah, I bet. You got a good bit.
You're too sharp, Dhammarato.
Pardon?
You're too sharp.
Sharp. Yes, I am. And I also, not humbly at all, recognize that the world will not be better off without me. That I've got wisdom, I've got things to teach, and that stuff's going to come to an end. I better get that stuff out and into your faces. And so I'm glad that you guys are asking these kind of questions so that I can depart this kind of wisdom that took me years to figure out. Took me years to figure out that I'm better off. Now, the case that I've got now is that, oh, well, you spent all of those years and you didn't have sex and you didn't have women, and now here you are in your old age. Yes, but it's got nothing to do with sex and women. It's got everything to do with family and being taken care of in my old age.
You know what's going to be amazing, Dhammarato? With all the new AI models coming out, all the videos you have out there, somebody will like train it on all your knowledge, and they'll be able to ask it like anything. You probably already heard, and it'll just answer how you would answer it.
Okay. Yes, I already know about that. In fact, that's a plan that's off in the future. Keyshawn has already been looking into that. The idea is to feed all the videos into the AI in a certain context. And then ask me anything, and the AI will answer the way that Dhammarato would answer the question. I have heard that they have already done that with Jesus, partly because what Jesus had to say is very, very concise, to where the number of videos that I've done, I think 1,600, so thousands. And so guess what? The Christians don't like Jesus's answers to their questions.
Really?
They don't like it. I mean, Jesus is about as far away from Christianity as they could possibly be. Like, for instance, most Christians are racist. They hold guns. I mean, this is Christianity and warfare have been hand in hand for centuries, and it keeps going on. And Jesus is all about peace and love and neighborhood and all of those kind of things, which goes greatly against the grain of the culture that we have now. But with people coming into the Buddhism, I think eventually it would be good to have an AI version of Dhammarato that can answer the questions the way that I would answer them. That way, I can check out even earlier. But I still have the responsibility to Kitty. That she's got to become an adult before I'm ready to die. I hold that as a responsibility. And if I didn't have Kitty, I wouldn't have that responsibility. I can say to Tam, hey, Tam, let's go find some one of those stupas that they put up for dead people in Thailand, and let me have it. And so that's the whole point about children, is that if you've got them, you have a responsibility to them. And my responsibility goes to the point that I must stay alive in order to take care of Kitty, just like any dad should have the responsibility. I must see this child into adulthood. It's our duty. It's our duty to the Dhamma. But we would not have that duty if we didn't have any kids. So when you see children as a huge, huge responsibility to the point that it changes your life completely. But it's biological. You could say, in fact, that the biology or the DNA or let us say, the human genome has been pulling dirty tricks on us as humans, wanting to give women the motherly instinct and giving men that procreation. Oh, I got to have it, I got to have it, I got to have it. And that's built into our DNA. And when the DNA then with I got to have it mixes with a bad culture, like a Christian culture that we come out of, and that gives us those two extremes. Oh, sex is bad, it's harmful, it's sinful, you're going to go to hell if you have sex. You got to be married and all of that kind of stuff on one hand. And sex is the best thing that you'll ever get. You got to really make sure that you're really, really getting what you need, you know? And so these great big extremes that we have are part of the cultural baggage that you carry around that pop up as thoughts that cause you suffering. And if you don't have any thoughts of sexuality, you're not going to suffer. If you have thoughts of, wow, that girl's beautiful, wow, I'd really like to have her panties, now we're suffering. We are wanting something that we don't have. And by the way, it's common enough that people will do that in any case. Oh, I want to be enlightened. It's the same problem. Oh, I wish I was enlightened. Well, be enlightened right now by stop having thoughts. I want. I want Nibbana. I want enlightenment. I want jhana. I want sotapan. I want a robe. All of this I want. Can we actually be satisfied with the way things are right this very moment? And this is how we practice. We sit down and we look at the thoughts that we're having and say, hey, I can do better than this. I don't have to think about women and wanting them. I can think about women and how glad I am that I don't have to put up with them. Instead of thinking about kids, oh, I want kids, and wow, I'm so glad I don't have kids.
So listen, wanting is an action that we don't notice, right?
That's why it's called ignorance. That's why ignorance is the big issue on the second noble truth. It's not necessarily the greed, and it's not necessarily our hatred. It's the fact that we don't notice.
Yeah, it's an effort we don't even notice. That's interesting.
Yeah, if we start to notice where the dukkha is in our mind, we can change it. Then we can live happy lives. Pardon?
It's an action. It's not like something that just happens. We just don't notice that we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, as the Buddha talks, I won't go into it in great detail, but he does say that the mind is the forerunner. You can't take an action until you think about taking that action. And maybe you think about it 100 times and then you act. Maybe if you stop thinking about it, you won't be into the acting of it.
Even noticing the action like drops off because you can see it. The ignorance is clear.
Right. If we begin to see that our actions, that our behavior is unsuitable, causing trouble, then we can begin to change our behavior. But the better thing to do, in fact, eventually, we'll get to the point that we see that it's our thoughts that give rise to our behavior. If we didn't think about it, we wouldn't do it. If we stop thinking about it and start thinking about doing some wholesome things, then we're more likely to be doing wholesome things because that's what we're thinking about. And if we start thinking about unwholesome things, guess what we're going to be doing? Unwholesome things. This is the whole practice, is to see those thoughts and make a change. Gladden the mind. Remove the unwholesome thoughts and put in wholesome thoughts, happy thoughts. Do it knowingly, not absent-mindedly. That's where the jhana comes from, to build it up. Wow, I could do this. In your case, Corey, wow, I really like being hungry. Oh, it's such a great feeling to be hungry. It's just a sensation, it's just a feeling, but it shows that good things are happening. So I can really like being hungry. Or I can really like not having to call on that chick, to knock her up, in both the British and the American way.
I had an interesting scenario. It was a few nights ago. I woke up with a lot of pain, and I don't know. I felt like very threatened by it, and
Sure,
like I was gonna die for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my body, I'm like, this is normal, because I did have some stomach surgery. I'm like, it's a thing, but you're not gonna die. Like, it's almost like I had to talk to like a kid.
You had to comfort yourself, of course, right? That's the whole point. That's anapanasati, and you were doing the right thing. When the pain comes, oh, I'm about to die, you can say, no, I'm not. Just because I don't like this pain doesn't mean anything. That in fact, maybe the pain is giving me a lesson. It's trying to teach me something. An example would be the pain is telling you to take it easy. We're healing here now, folks. Be easy on that knee. Let it heal. The example, by the way, is the kid with the broken arm. There are two kinds of kids that have two broken arm. One heals within 6 weeks. The other one will take months to heal. Why? Because the kid who is taking only 6 weeks to heal is because he's not using his hand in that cast. That he's got the cast in a sling and he holds the hand still. Because if he holds the hand still, then all those arm muscles around that knitting bone will stay fallow, stay placid, and the healing can occur. But if he picks up water with that broken arm, if he picks up a glass of water, starts writing, doing anything with that broken arm, it's going to heal very slowly. And not only that, but his arm hurts. He's hurting, it hurts because he's using it. If he stops using it, it will stop hurting, and it will heal on its own. And there's a difference, by the way, between hurting and healing. Hurting is not healing, and healing is itching. If the arm is itching, that means it's knitting and it's doing a good job. But if it's hurting, that means that you're doing something to prevent it from healing. It all, again, is everything starts in the mind. If you can hold your hand still because you remember to hold your hand still, then the arm will heal quicker. If you can stay off of that knee and not walk on it, then it's going to heal much quicker. And if you stop thinking about girls, your gonads are going to heal. That in fact, this is
Dhammarato. My girlfriend's gonna kill me from this conversation.
Well, that's because she's wanting into a state of desire. She wants something from you, and if she stops wanting, she'll be happy too. Almost all marriages not end, but along the way, they stop having sex. They get married often to have sex. Within 6 months or a year, it dwindles down. 5 years later, it doesn't happen often. 10 years in, we don't even like each other anymore. So that attraction is short-lived. But children take, 25 years to grow up nowadays. And what a responsibility that is. So it's better not to. Not only that, but in the really, really old days, women had no choice. because they had no medicine. It was either you don't do it or you have to suffer. Nowadays, medical science has come in. We've got abortion. We've got abortion pills. We've got the pills on the day after. We've got condoms. We've got STD medicines for AIDS and herpes and all that kind of stuff that makes sex much less of a problem than it used to be. And now the Western mentality is that, oh, it's a relief. I have sex to relieve myself from all the pressures of the day. Well, if you don't have any pressures of the day, then you don't need that kind of relief. Take the pressure off. In fact, most of the pressure that we have is the pressure of getting laid.
You gotta eat, you gotta get laid, you gotta go to sleep. You got 3 pressures.
Actually, we won't, but we really only have one. It's quite possible for like Achan Poes of the world, they've never had sex, and he's 93 and he's happy as a lark. Okay? So, sex we can do without. You're fasting. You can do without food. We could do without water even for a couple of 3 days. How long can you go without breathing? You're going to die within 3 minutes, Corey, if you don't breathe. You gotta have the air. This is part of the reason why Anapanasati takes in that consideration. It says we need to breathe. Let's pay attention to it. This is the most important thing you do every minute is you keep breathing. Do you know it? Or you just forget about it? If you forget about it, then it becomes only biological, and then we don't get enough air. The body takes a rest in the sense of breathing very shallowly, which makes the carbon dioxide build up and the oxygen to go down. But if we're consciously breathing, then we reverse that cycle. That's one thing about the fasting, Corey, that every time that you think about being hungry or being tired, the first thing and immediately to do is to take a deep breath, saying, oh, this breath is going to drive the hunger away, and this breath is going to stop me from being tired. Do something about it right now. Always it's right now. The thought that we're having right now is going to prevent us from getting into trouble tomorrow. Because if we have the thought of getting into trouble tomorrow and have that thought until tomorrow, we'll have that trouble tomorrow. But if we see that thought today and say, I'm not going to think that thought, and I'm not going to think that thought, I'm going to have happier, healthful thoughts, then I'm not going to be doing that behavior tomorrow. This is why it's so important to change the mind, to change the thoughts that we're having. Whether it's about sex, whether it's about food, whatever it is, let's take the really all of that unimportant stuff, because sex is really not all of that important. It's driving people into craziness. Wars get started because of sex. The fashion industry got started because of sex. The cosmetic industry is there because of sex. So much is happening because of sex that we don't even need. If we would stop thinking about sex and start thinking about, wow, I'm so glad I don't have to put up with that anymore. That's one of the benefits of old age, is because then we don't have to think about it anymore. Yes, Corey, go ahead.
Hey, so I have noticed sometimes that it feels like I don't have any thoughts, but there somehow I have like kind of mood, right? So we've all had a feeling of kind of quiet thoughts, but we obviously have something going on that's creating a kind of a subconscious mood or just a general mood.
That subconscious quality, though, is thoughts that we're not aware of.
So
even if you haven't been thinking about it for a while.
You can transform them.
Mm-hmm. Well, then if we're in a bad mood and you see that you're in a bad mood, then what can we do about it? Right then and there, oh, I'm in a bad mood. You want to fight? Instead of, oh, I'm in a bad mood, let me take a deep, long breath and see if I can play with this mood. Let me gladden it up. Let me brighten it up. Again, the mind is the forerunner. If you're in a bad mood, take a deep breath and say, well, I'm so glad I figured out that I was in a bad mood because now I can change it. So now I can change. Huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So your strategy isn't really to like become more aware of negative thoughts that might be making you feel bad. It's to just sense. So like, let's say that to begin with, people have to have a negative thought to know to make it wholesome. Eventually, do you get to a point where you don't even feel the negative thought anymore? You just sense that you're having a bad mood or that a negative thought is coming, and just straight up make it wholesome without even hearing the negative thought?
Right. And so it's then a matter of, hey, I can change that. If I'm in a bad mood, hey, I can change that bad mood. If I'm having thoughts of desire, hey, I can change those thoughts. Always with the idea that I can change. This is what we have in the Eightfold Noble Path is right effort. Right noble effort is to change from the unwholesome to the wholesome.
What about if I'm in a bad mood, it's not the bad mood that's bothering me, it's the fact that I don't want to be in a bad mood.
Right, you don't like it.
When I realize, when I realize that it's not the bad mood, it's the fact that I feel like I shouldn't be in a bad mood. As soon as I see that it just goes away on its own. You're like, oh, even if I'm in a bad mood, like it's great.
Well, it doesn't go away on its own. It goes away because you've begun to change your thoughts already because you recognize that you were in a bad mood. And you can say, hey, I can change this. And that would be also a subconscious thought. We can have subconscious, unwholesome and wholesome thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
The thing to do is to bring them into consciousness so that you can think what you want to think because you can see what you're thinking rather than having those thoughts just spin off without us paying any attention to them. Do you know how many thoughts you have in an hour? How many thoughts do you have in an hour? 10,000 or so? Well, no, probably only about 3,500. I would say something like between 3,500 and 10,000 thoughts in an hour. How many of them do you track? Not many. All the rest of them are what we call subconscious. They're not subconscious. We're just not paying attention to them. If we start paying attention to our thoughts, now we can change them.
They're like inclinations, right? Like little feelings here and there, do this, do that.
Absolutely. Okay. Inclinations. There's several words. Inclinations. Another one would be intentions. Another one would be a niggle. Another one would be attitude. All right, they're not fully formed thoughts, or maybe they're formed, but they're so deeply unconscious that it's kind of just a leaning. It's not a fully formed thought in the sense of a sentence structure, but it happens also very fast, a tenth of a second or so. And so start watching those thoughts. I wouldn't say watch all 10,000 of them in an hour because you're not going to be able to do that, but you can begin to see how fast some of these thoughts are. So fast that you wouldn't even call it a thought. It's more like an intention or a niggle or something, some sort of trigger. But you're not going to be in a bad mood unless something triggers you into that bad mood. Could be a little thought, like, for instance, just the thought of an email. And that email, let us say that on the email screen, you've got a particular color. Let us say a deep red. And so every time that you see or think about that color deep red, all of a sudden you feel bad because you've got to write your boss that email. And you didn't put any of that stuff into the thought system. All you had was that red thought, and now you feel bad. That's how fast that stuff can be. Can you begin to pay attention to it? Can you pay attention to when you're thinking about a girl, recognize that that's what you're doing. Make a change to it. When you're having thought about an argument that you had, you just think of somebody, and let us say that you just had an argument with Aunt Susie or Granny or someone. And now all you have to do is just have a thought of that person in the sense of maybe a visual image. It might be just a visual image of a piece of clothing that she wore. Let us say polka dot. She was wearing a polka dot dress when you had the argument, and all we have to do is think of or have a slight little image of polka dot, and all of a sudden we're ready to argue again. These are what we call triggers.
I've had experiences, Dhammarato, when the mind becomes like very powerful. I used to tell my friends, like, I don't have any original thoughts, and they were confused by what I was saying. But every thought I had, I could like link it to at that moment to something I did or saw recently. I even remember I was driving, and then I saw a bunny and whatever, and I forgot about it completely. 5 minutes later, I was making a turn. I saw a nice piece of grass. I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's bunnies here. And I was like, I could immediately see it's because I saw a bunny 5 minutes ago is why I just thought a bunny there. It was the weirdest thing. Like I wasn't, trying, but it just, everything was like, I don't have any original thoughts.
Exactly. Most of the thoughts we have are in fact thoughts that we had that we were learned from childhood. Like the thought of those people are bad. Oh, they wear funny clothing, they must be bad. And we picked that up when we were in childhood, and we continue to have those kind of thoughts.
And that's ignorance. And we don't recognize it.
And we don't recognize it. And there's two things that we don't recognize, and one of them is that this is an old thought. This is not a new thought. This is an old thought. And number two, we don't recognize it not only as an old thought, but it's dangerous.
And we think it's our thought, right? So there's a self.
We think it, and we own it. We think we own it. Just like the people, when they see me with the dog, they think I own the dog. No, I don't own the dog. The dog thinks it owns me. We think of our thoughts as my thought. These are not my thoughts. These are just thoughts.
And that's like self-liberating, right? If you knew where the thought came from, you know it's not yours.
Yeah, you don't even have to know where it came from to know that it's not yours. We don't have to know the origins of things. All we need to do is see it right here, right now, this present moment. This is how it is. Never mind where it came from.
And none of our thoughts are ours, yeah.
It's good to know that most of our thoughts came from our childhood rather than from present moment. If we can recognize that, then we can say, oh, that's old stuff. Oh, me wanting women, that's an old thing. I'm 78 right now. I don't have to think about what I was thinking about when I was 15 or 18.
I like
Those
that.
are just old thoughts. Not my thoughts at all.
Is that Paticca Samuppada?
Yeah, exactly. That in fact, exactly the way that it works in Paticca Samuppada is that it's the sankara, the old stuff, that filters and invades our perceptions that bring on the new thoughts.
Oh, yeah, proliferates, right?
Yeah, they proliferate that way. They proliferate through perception, the way we see things. And the way we see things is the past. We see things the way that we used to see them until we intentionally start to change so that you can say, I can see the way that it should be seen because I'm practicing to see things the way that they actually are rather than the way that I was taught. That's easy. Easy to say, this thought, I don't need it. I can change this thought to something else. that we don't have to get stuck in thoughts. That the mind just jumps and jumps and jumps and jumps, and it normally jumps into something that is unwholesome because it's in the habit of jumping into something wholesome. So now we're going to start training the mind so that it jumps into the wholesome. It jumps into the wholesome. Instead of saying, oh, I'm hungry, say, wow, I'm really glad that I feel hunger right now. That proves to me that I'm doing something good. Everything is like that. Okay? So when a thought of sexuality comes, you can say, wow, I'm glad I don't have to run after that one.
Good question. What would you do? Let's say that like one of those thoughts came up and you turned it wholesome and the thought repeated in the wholesome way.
Mm-hmm. And everybody begins to feel bad because they said, oh, well, I had a wholesome thought. Why didn't it stick? I had a wholesome thought. Why didn't it stick? Okay, the answer is that no, you're in a habit of having unwholesome thoughts. It's good to have one wholesome thought, but then you go back into the unwholesome thoughts, including I should be having wholesome thoughts. I should be having wholesome thoughts is an unwholesome thought. I am having wholesome thoughts is a wholesome thought.
Well, no, this is what I meant. Let's say that you had a desire for something in a bad way and you suffered from it, but then you turned the desire into a wholesome way to view the desire, and so you felt good. And you had that same thought 3 or 4 times. Would you take that to mean that that was like a desire worth pursuing if the desire continued to come back in a wholesome way?
No, it doesn't necessarily come back in a wholesome way. We can lie to ourselves. We can delude ourselves into saying, oh, it used to be unwholesome, and now I want it to be wholesome. Therefore, I see it as wholesome, where in fact it's not necessarily wholesome. Depends upon the dukkha.
Okay. Well, that's like not intuitive way, so I figured
it's not intuitive. You have to keep coming back to, no, this is going to be wholesome. No, this is going to be wholesome. We have to put that effort in to get that ball rolling. And then we have to keep the effort up to keep the ball rolling. If you stop and say, oh, well, I'm having wholesome thoughts now, I don't have to keep watching anymore, then the whole thing will slow back down and we're back stuck in the place that we were before. No, we have to keep pushing. We have to keep putting wholesome thoughts in. Hello, Kat. Well, guys, this has been a long call. I thought about 10 minutes in, we're finished here, we're done, but we found something to continue on about. We started off talking about fasting, and we started talking about sex instead. Hello, Kat. So you're out of the retreat.
Yeah, I'm here in the house, but Scott was messaging me about he has the bike and all this stuff.
Yeah, but I've got this one. You can get the old one. Come on over and get it.
But you're finished the call now?
Yeah, we're about to finish now.
Oh, okay. Bad timing.
Guys, are we, Corey, I'm really glad that you asked this question. Are you fairly clear with what we've been talking about, both with the fasting and I see, in fact, the food and the sex it's the same issue. Food and sex are the same issue. If you want it, you're in trouble. If you feel good without it, then you're not in trouble.
Definitely very beneficial. I mean, like I've done a lot of fasting in the past, and 1 meal a day. I mean, intermittent fasting, and in the past, I haven't kind of like utilized it in the full way by, trying to use it like training weights or something. I just kind of didn't use it in the fullest potential, I guess. So I feel like it was a really great talk because I like to do 1 meal a day, which is a kind of fasting, and like what I would call water fasting or hard fasting is quite uncomfortable, and it's not very enjoyable. But one meal a day is quite enjoyable because you could get the benefit of everything and not, have the negatives.
Right.
It's basically no negatives because you're getting the vital nutrients. You're feeling really good too. It's the best of both worlds. And I really enjoyed the talk. I feel like that was good going on about sexuality because, that it's basically a really similar thing. I mean, you don't have to have sex. You do have to eat. So but pretty much similar things, they're both very strong desires. It was really great talk. I really enjoyed it and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Okay, so keep breathing because you really need that.
That's right. Breathe in.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and finish this call. This has been really good, as Corey stated. Kat, you're on Kopangan now?
Yeah. I was going to message you. I sent you a message. Can I come up later or whenever you want? Whenever.
All right. I'll see you later then. Come
All
on
right.
over.
All right,
All
cool.
right.
See you later.
Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Been a
Dhammarato.
great talk.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.